All right, I think we're going to get going. Thanks everybody for joining us on this beautiful evening for our native plants for city spaces. Hopefully it's just inspiring you, this weather, versus making you feel trapped. But we're also recording this tonight, so don't worry if you do miss anything. We will be sending this out to everybody. It's going to be available on Facebook because we're also streaming this live right now on Facebook. So it'll be on our Facebook page. We'll also have it on our website. And we're going to be doing a follow-up email after this that you guys will get tomorrow. And in that follow-up email, you have a link to this. You're going to have Jackie's PowerPoint presentation, which she's been kind enough to offer, and a list of places that are having plant sales this summer as well. So look for that in your email box probably tomorrow. Other than that, we have our next seminar coming up. That is about the ins and outs of attic expansion. So if you're looking to grow your space, we have a wonderful architect, Frank, who's going to be talking about some ways you can think about style and how to sort of make the most of any sort of work you're doing that way. And I guess we can get moving. That's all I have. But again, if you just jumped on, we will send out a recording of this, so don't panic if you miss anything. Also, Jackie's going to talk for about 40 minutes tonight. After that, we're going to do Q&A up until 7 p.m. So as much as we can pack in there, we're going to pack in there. So think on your questions. Our chat is going to be disabled. So please plug any questions you have in the Q&A box down at the bottom of the screen. And we'll be looking at those throughout Jackie's talk tonight. So I just wanted to introduce Jackie for those of you who don't know her, because she's been working with us for about 150 years now, about as long as I've been working with the Bungalow Association as well. Jackie Riffice was born and raised in the south suburbs, growing up in Dolton and settling in Flossmoor with Larry to raise 2 kids to adults who are good citizens of the planet. She found quite by accident that gardening was relaxing and that digging in the dirt was her happy place. Along the way, she founded Prairie Godmothers, a service-based, hands-on company that created sustainable home landscapes and touted the benefits of greener living by demonstrating how to save the planet in easy-peasy ways. Jackie put Prairie Godmothers to bed a few years ago, but continues to help out when a call comes in. Jackie's a master gardener, a volunteer with the Lurie Garden in Chicago, and has a long history with the Chicago Bungalow Association and our members. Without further ado, Jackie, if you want to go ahead and get moving on your presentation, take the floor. Oh, Jackie, you're muted still.
How's that?
That is perfect.
All right. Welcome to Native Plants for City Spaces. I hope to spend the next 30 or 40 minutes telling you something that you might not already know and give you some ideas to bring back to your historic landscape. Next. Carla did a really great intro for me. I always feel like I sound better on paper than I really am in person, but yes, it is true. I founded Prairie Godmothers about 15 years ago. And after a couple of knee and hip surgeries, the second hip coming this Thursday, I had to put Prairie Godmothers to bed a few years ago. But when the Bungalow Association calls, I am at the ready. I'm also a master gardener and a garden volunteer. If you've heard me before, you know I speak lovingly about the Lurie Garden in Millennium Park, which is where I'm pictured cleaning up the daffodils on this screen. Next. There are about 20 vintage styles for historic homes in and around the Bungalow Belt, and they all have very distinctive features, but they have one thing in common, usually, and that's the outside features a very small planting footprint. What you have right here are really nice and neat and lovely, tidy views, but if you want to spice things up and do good for the planet, try going native, and I'm going to give you some ideas. Next. That's not me, but it feels like me some days. This whole garden thing, you know, can just be exhausting because we want to take everything on at one time, but I'm going to try to make it simple for you. We're going to learn a few things about native plants, why you want them, how to bring them into your bungalow or historic home. and it'll take a little bit of the exhaustion out of planning for your landscape. Next. What I'd like you to walk away with today are a few things. Understanding what a native is and why they're important. How to get started in your very own landscape with native plants. What plants work for you. And we'll talk about how to bring other plants into the landscape to make it feel like home. We're happy to share what we know and how you can bring more things to your urban landscape. But as I mentioned from time to time, every gardener has their own set of garden values and practices, which means if you ask 4 gardeners the same question, you'll get 4 different answers, and they will all be correct. So what I will tell you tonight, I'll provide some tips and time savers during the next several minutes. And they're based on my studies as a master gardener, my experience as a gardener, and oftentimes my failures in the garden as well. Next. So what the heck is all this native stuff about? Why do we want to add natives to our bungalows? It's really all about bringing nature home by providing food for native birds, bees, butterflies, and other beneficials. And the key to this is we want to invite these beautiful creatures back to our yards and invite their babies too. Why are birds and bees and butterflies disappearing? It's quite simple. They're experiencing dramatic declines due to the loss of habitat, diseases, parasites, overuse of pesticides, a couple other factors. Common bird species such as meadowlarks, bobolinks, some sparrows, some bobwhites are disappearing and have decreased by more than 80% over the last 50 years. So how do we bring our landscapes and our environment back to life when we see such a decline like this? Well, there have been significant studies that say when non-native species were introduced to our country over 100 years ago, those would be Asian and European varieties of plants and trees. They came here because they were beautiful and they were long lasting. But the thing is, native birds, bees, butterflies, and other beneficials don't eat the fruits and berries and leaves and bark that these plants produce. They'll do it if they have to, but more importantly, their babies will not. And so when you don't feed your babies, you don't continue to expand the population. They don't like to eat non-native species, which results in the demise of and decline in wildlife. But this guy right here, Doug Tallamy, if you haven't read him, this is a really great book to just go through as you're sitting on your patio all summer. Dr. Tallamy says we can change all of this by bringing nature back to our own backyards. And it just takes 1 or 2 plants to start changing this around. So that's why we do this. And it's a book that I would really recommend you take a look at, because it also gives you not just the numbers and the science, but step-by-step ways to introduce things to your own landscape to bring nature home. Next. If you wonder what a native is kind of like me, kind of indigenous to the area. It originated here. It can withstand seasonal changes, the highs and lows, the wets and colds. It's not always the most showiest plant or in the neighborhood, but it can always be counted on to show up. So it's one that occurs naturally and has been around for often hundreds of years. They come back season after season, and these are the guys that provide haven and hideaway and habitat for birds, bees, butterflies, and their babies. A native plant is similar to a perennial plant. A perennial is what most of you probably have in your gardens that come back every year. An annual just is good for a season and then you toss that away. But a perennial comes back every year for at least 2 years. and will continue to grow. They're not indigenous to an area like a native, but they live peacefully right alongside of them. A naturalized plant is not a native, but it's one that reseeds and spreads and attracts pollinators all the same. They can return year after year. So think of daylilies, daffodils, ground cover, things like that that naturalize and spread over time and come back year after year. Those are all really great things to have in a garden, but let's talk about bringing some natives back and understanding what the benefits are. Next one. Natives have really, really deep root systems. And the good news about that is they anchor the plants in soil as the plants try to reach for sunlight. They store excess food for future needs underground. They nourish our soil, even our suburban and urban landscape soil, by dying and then regrowing new roots each year, which helps build topsoil. They fix nitrogen in the soil, which is a great food for plants to not only look beautiful on top, but look good underneath. They absorb and hold toxins and metals and carbons, rainwater runoff. They actually act as a filter to prevent all of that, all of those toxins and oils from going back into your property. They prevent erosion, so you won't have your gardens washing away after a heavy rain or a heavy snow. But the added benefit is it makes us more responsible citizens to help us nurture our gardens, to bring nature back, and to stay ahead of climate change, filter water, restore the habitat. So this picture depicts what you might see if you could see below the ground. An average perennial plant or even an annual might have a root system maybe 6 inches long. These guys can go from 8 to 14 feet, and they play an important role in helping plants thrive in our gardens. Next one. So we're going to get started talking about how to pick out plants, how to plan your garden, how to get your soil ready, and so on. But the most important thing to remember as we get started is this. I encourage you to take what I call the happy path. Make it fun. Don't over-engineer it. Start small and easy. If you don't know what to do, get inspired by a city garden, a local nursery, some online pictures, or sites that I'll recommend you to look at today. It's just a matter of being brave and confident, even when you don't feel like you can be brave and confident. So let's get started. Next. Whether you're creating a new garden space or adding plants into your existing garden space, the first thing to do is to select the spot you want to work with. This is the time of year when we get thrilled with all the things we want to do around the house. Thank goodness your footprints around the house are kind of small, because otherwise you'd be spending every weekend between now and October doing things around your yard. But I encourage you to find a spot where you want to create a new garden or add to the one you already have, and start with the space that calls to you. And that means find the space you either love or hate, one that you want to give attention to right away. I have a spot in my house that I love it to death, and it's a visible spot to everybody that drives past the house. So that's where I put my attention today to try to clean it up and get ready for for this upcoming season. The rest of the stuff is tucked away behind the house, and when I have the time and energy to address it, I will. But I selected that space because it's a space that everybody sees. Select a space that where you want to attract bees and butterflies. Select a space that has a problem that you want to solve. But just pick one, because those other spaces will stay around all summer until you have time to look at them. You have to understand the profile of your property. When is it sunny? When is it shady? Where is it wet? Where is it dry? And the reason you want to do this is you want to be able to select plants that are going to survive in the conditions around your property. And so The thing about natives is, for the most part, they can handle sun, shade, wet, and dry, no matter what. But get familiar with how the sun moves around your house during the course of a day. Part sun means 4 to 6 hours of direct sun every day. Part shade means a shorter period of sunlight, or an area that's sheltered by the house next door, or a big tree or a building. So understand where the sun and shade hits. And after a rain, walk around the house in your bare feet if you can, and you'll see where your property is wet or dry, where that water stays around, especially after 24 hours. Is it still squishy, or is it dry? Again, you want to understand this, because when you go to buy your plants, annual, perennial, native, you want to buy and invest in what is the best plant for your location. As gardeners, you probably have found yourself in a position where you saw a plant, you had to have it, you brought it home, and then you said, what do I do with it? If you look at it the other way around, if you know the conditions and you go into your local nursery, you can say, I have a shady spot that's kind of wet, and that's what you'll look like. And you will come home with a plant that just fits right in that space. The next thing you do in your garden when you're wanting to put plants in, and again, I'm talking about natives, but this is good garden information, no matter what you're planting or where you're planting. You have to make sure that the soil is healthy, and we call that amending the soil. If it's a new garden spot, I remove the grass and I turn over the top 5 or 6 inches of soil to make sure the grass for the most part is out, and I've gotten rid of any weeds that might be down there. You might have clay in your property. You might have sand. Bungalows have both, it just kind of depends. If you get clumps of clay that you can't break up, just toss them out. They won't help your soil at all. And then I would add a cocktail of compost and planting soil to the space, about 3 inches worth. That means you go into your compost bin in the backyard, or you go to your local nursery and you get planting soil and compost. 1 part planting soil to 2 parts compost. You mix them up, make a nice little cocktail, and you put that in your planting space. And you want to build that up on top of the soil that you've just turned over, about 3 inches worth. If it's an existing garden spot, I do things just a little bit differently. I find the spot where I want to plant, and I turn the top 3 inches of soil over. That again helps me just aerate the soil, freshen it up a little bit. And I also will add that cocktail into the hole that I dig to plant the new plant. So you want to give your garden a good start by making sure that the plant that you drop in the soil is going to be healthy, not just on top, but underneath. And then finally, the last thing to do in your garden space, new space or existing space, is give it a nice clean edge. There are lots of ways to separate or delineate your garden landscape from your grass. People use pavers, bricks, any number of things. I just like a nice crisp edge that I dig myself. I use a sharp shovel and I kind of dig a small trench. If you can imagine a V, cutting a V in the grass to separate it and clearing that out, that's kind of like a small trench. And that's how I separate mine. But I guarantee you, if you pay attention to these 3 things, whether you're planting a larger garden or just filling in, it's going to be really show-stopping, and it's going to be healthy as well. Next one. Before you shop, before you spend any money, you have to sketch it out. Whether you draw your ideas on the back of a napkin or you're an engineer and you put a lot of detail in it, it's a good idea to just sketch it out so you can visualize what you're going to plant and what it's going to look like. If you want to further have if you want to further define it and you want to step out of the sketch, you can actually use the landscape and visualize it by using extension cords and tennis balls. Extension cords help you map out the new garden space you want by just dragging that, those cords, or a hose would work as well, dragging that out around the space, and then placing tennis balls or anything else that it won't blow away in the spaces where you think you want to plant your trees and grasses and flowers. When you start shopping, a good idea for especially brand new gardeners is just select between 3 and 5 different species of plants. Keep it really simple. And then of those 3 or 5 species, you're going to buy them in uneven numbers. So you might buy 3 of one, 5 of another, 7 of another. But we like to plant in odd numbers. It makes the eye focus and it gives you a focal point. And it's just good garden design. We'll talk a little bit about putting the right plant in the right place. I'm going to give you some ideas, but as I said earlier, you want to make sure the right plant in the right place is selected because it will deal with sunshade, wet or dry. And then finally, before you even endeavor to do any of this, I'd like you to understand your garden appetite. Native gardens require less care and tending than perennial gardens, but you still have to water them until they're established. Over a few years, you can split the plants out and move some plants elsewhere, which is why native gardens are really good on the budget. But as you get started, just keep these numbers in mind. It's about $15 to $20 per square foot for you to create a new garden space. That includes preparing the soil, purchasing the plants, planting them, and mulching. And it's a good way to understand what you're stepping into and how much it's going to cost to do that. Next. I use online helpers. So I'm going to share 4 online helpers that can also help you plan your gardens. I'll give you some ideas, but you have to do a little bit of homework. And because I'm a master gardener, I'm really schooled in looking at facts and solid information. And so these places that are up on the screen are my 4 go-tos. Possibility Place is a native nursery that's out by me. I live south of the city in Flossmoor, about 30 minutes south of the city. Moni is more south than that, about 20 minutes past me. You folks on the north side might feel like you're driving to Kentucky or Tennessee, but I guarantee you you're not. Possibility Place has an online store. They have they allow you to come into their property and shop. And they're native growers, which means they are the guys that are the purists. They collect the seeds, they grow from seed every plant that comes out of the place. And so if you're looking for information on natives that work well in this area, take advantage of their plant database. I also like grownative.org, which is a Missouri-based organization. What I like about that is it gives me lots of ideas on how to cheat in my garden. They have top 10 lists, top 10 best plants to have to attract butterflies, top 10 best plants for shade, top 10 best plants, for creating an herbal garden. And they use natives on all of that. And they give webinars, so it's pretty informative. So as you're thinking about what you might put in your garden, consider these guys too. The next one is Prairie Moon Nursery. They're located in Minnesota. And I might add that all of these guys are in the Midwest because we want to use plants, native plants that thrive in the Midwest. And so this is another one, a Minnesota location. They do have online plants that you can buy. They have seeds. They have plant sales. And then the last one is Wild Ones. Wild Ones is an organization that you can join. They're in Illinois. They offer plant suggestions, garden ideas, and they also have plant sales. And so these are 4 places that I lean on for my online helpers. I'm particularly fond of Possibility Place because they have plants that I know are available. If you've never purchased online before or through the mail, again, these are places I've purchased from Possibility Place and Prairie Moon Nursery. And I can tell you that they sell and deliver as advertised. The Bungalow Association just published a blog yesterday that lists almost 50 locations for you to purchase plants, native and otherwise. I'll always encourage you to shop local and read the plant tags, and I can guarantee you that for all of the native plant sales that are published on this document, I would say 80% of the plants have been grown by Possibility Place. And so they are everywhere you want to go. Often plants are marked at these places that are listed on the blog. They're local nurseries, which is great. Often plants are listed as native, but they're really what I call native cultivars, which means they have some bit of native DNA, but they're cultivated and bred for certain traits like extra color, extra long lasting, through the seasons. So, and that's fine too. The introduction of even one native to your garden is going to help bring nature back. Next one. This is an example of what I would call a butterfly garden. These plants are tall and they're presented in drifts. They all play nicely together. This particular garden will grow about 4 feet tall. It attracts bees, butterflies, dragonflies, birds like finches and hummingbirds. None of these guys are hard to find. The first one is a purple coneflower. It is a native. And I have purple coneflowers in my garden. Echinacea purpurea is the botanic name. They're in my garden and I leave them standing all year until spring when I cut them down like I did today. The seed heads are beloved by finches and other small sparrows. So that's how I add some interest to my garden even during the winter. The second plant is kind of hard to see. It's all blended in, it looks green, but that's called Baptisia. Baptisia is a native. It is more of a shrub than a plant, but it grows sort of like 3 to 4 feet tall in a round shape, and it's a nice filler in gardens if you have space you want to fill. Number 3 is common yarrow. That's the yellow plant that's there. Butterflies love it. And there are many different varieties of yarrow, but common yarrow is the native brand, the native type. Number 4, the orange you see in there is butterfly weed. We'll talk a little bit about milkweed, but butterfly weed is something that attracts butterflies. It is a native. It's one of the few oranges you'll be able to find in the garden. And then finally in the front is common milkweed with that very purple, beautiful bloom on it. This is a host plant to monarch butterflies. All 3 of these plants, with the exception, or all 4 of these plants, with the exception of Baptisia, are plants that will naturalize in your garden and kind of spread out. Butterfly weed and common milkweed you will find growing in lots of places. So this is a particularly good garden to put in on the side of a garage, if you have something up against a fence, in between houses where you want some height and you don't mind if the plants move about. Next. These guys are not really well behaved. The blazing star is actually a well-behaved plant. It's a native, and you can put that in any garden and it'll stand nice and tall. But she's surrounded by goldenrod and the obedient plant. Again, wild and wonderful. So this is an area where you, behind the garage, toward the alley, they're not well behaved. They will reseed, they will continue to grow. The obedient plant particularly is not very obedient. It got the name because you can push the bloom from side to side, and if you move the flower one direction, it'll stay there as if it's listening to you. But it's a really bad listener. They kind of wander about. But again, there's a plant for every place in the native family. Next one. If grasses are your thing, there are a number of native grasses you can use in your garden space. The beauty of grasses is you can keep them up all year. I cut mine down in the spring and give them a full start again, but it's one of the most beautiful colors you'll get in the garden as you get into fall and winter. The first one on the list is blue-eyed grass. It's teeny tiny. It might get 8 inches tall, and it has a little blue flower on it. It comes back every year. It makes a really great plant in a bungalow border. The second one is blue grama grass. It's about 10 inches high. It clumps very nicely. And again, that's good for a border. The third one is little blue stem. Little blue stem is not always blue, and it's not always little. It's a nice, beautiful plant that is good at the back of a garden. It takes up a lot of space, haven and hideaway for birds. And at its best, it has a scarlet and blue hue to it until it starts getting toward fall, when it changes into a nice, beautiful red color. The second picture has switchgrass, which is tall and it fans out, and it has a nice way to fill in a garden. And then behind that, which is kind of hard to see, is prairie dropseed. Prairie dropseed smells like popcorn to some people. It has a really interesting scent. And these are great things to have in a garden, either for mass planting or as fillers. So again, these guys are all native. Don't forget about them in your garden. Next one. If I haven't already said it, when you plant your perennials and your natives, you have to consider 3 things, especially for an impatient gardener. The first year they sleep, the second year they creep, and the third year they leap. So you have to be really patient. And these are 3 plants that ask your patience. At least 2 of them do. The first one is a brown-eyed Susan. You've heard of black-eyed Susans. This is the native variety, the brown-eyed Susan. The second plant is a swamp milkweed. It's in the milkweed family, but it gets a beautiful purplish, pinkish flower on it. And then the next one is called Anise hyssop, or agastache. This plant is one of my favorites. It's loved by butterflies. It smells like licorice. I love it. So this is how to introduce some color, texture, and scent to your garden. And these guys all do well in wetter areas. Mine are planted in dry areas and they thrive wonderfully, but in a wet area, they would really take off. Next one. This is actually a picture of a rain garden that one of the bungalow owners had in their backyard to catch rainwater runoff of it as it came off of their bungalow down the slope of their backyard toward their garage. And planted in here, you'll see 2 plants I've already talked about, hyssop and coneflower, and then Pennsylvania sedge, which is a really small, low-growing plant. Sedges are really great plants in wet areas, and they make really great borders. And this was a wonderful garden to put in because it added a lot of color and it actually solved a problem. They, the homeowners were concerned about the backyard getting all wet and squishy, and these plants and others helped solve a problem in this rain garden, which was all native plants. Rain gardens are also beloved by the Chicago Bungalow Association, and there's a ton of information on their website, and I think videos as well on how to put a rain garden in your backyard. Next. This is an existing beautiful bungalow that's pictured on the Bungalow website, but I wanted to point out that among all the perennial plants and grasses there are two plants that are native. Number one is a shrub called a sweet spire, and number two is a hydrangea called Hydrangea arborescens, or an Annabelle hydrangea. So this is where you can add little plants here and there, or shrubs in between areas. And again, we've invited nature back by putting natives in there. Next. This is why you'd want to have a printout of this deck, because I'm mentioning flowers and I'm going to fly through some of them, but these are flowers that I have in my garden, and I really swear by them because they're long lasting. They grow throughout a season, and they give my garden lots of color from end of May all the way through September or October. They're easy to get, and they're hardy, and they grow well. So the first one is called gentian, or bottle gentian. It blooms in June and July. I love it because of that color. And the blooms themselves never open until a bee will find its way to the plant and crawl in it and cause the petals to open. Another kind of coneflower to put in your garden is called the pale coneflower. These petals are really droopy. They're beautiful to me, and again, finches love them as well. The third one is turtlehead, or chelone. This is a beautiful plant to put in a garden. It likes wet feet, but mine is in a dry spot, a dry sunny spot. It does well, and it also moves about very nicely. So you can start out with 3 plants, and in the course of 3 years, you'll cover maybe 4 or 5 feet because it likes to move along. The one on the bottom is called alum root. If you've heard of coral bells, this is the native version of coral bells. It's a beautiful green color. It catches dew beautifully, and it gets long yellow and sometimes white spikes on it. It's a really good shade or part shade plant, and also good for the front of a garden. And then the bottom one is cardinal flower. Cardinal flower is one of the few reds you'll get in a garden, and it doesn't last all that long, end of June, early July, but it is again loved by the beneficials that fly into your garden, and brings a lot of color as well. Next one. These are more well-behaved natives, again, easy to get. Columbine, which you might have in your garden already, but perhaps not the native variety. That is a 24 to 30 inch kind of spiky but delicate plant, and it'll find its way throughout your garden and will pop up in unexpected places. The great blue lobelia is in the same family as the cardinal flower that I just showed you. And this again has one of those beautiful sapphire colors. This is a good one to have toward the back of the garden, and it especially thrives in wetter areas. So if you have a soggy place by your garage or by your front porch, that's the place for it. The next one is Baptisia. It's a picture that, it's a full picture of what I showed you earlier. It's more shrubby. It has beautiful flowers on it, but it gets actually very wide. So if you're looking for something perhaps in the front of your house and would like a shrub of sorts, this might be one you consider. The next one on the bottom is wild bergamot. You might have heard it called bee balm. You might have heard it called monarda. They're all the same. But again, you can see a bumblebee going after that. It's a pale purple color, and they're not always really hardy in a garden, but we like to bring them in because of the beneficials they attract. Also, you can take the leaves from the wild bergamot and make bergamot tea. And then the last one that I recommend is called penstemon or beard tongue. If you looked at this plant up close and looked at the inside the plant, the pistil is really hairy, which is why it has the name beard tongue. It is a sturdy plant. It will stay in your garden from June all the way through September with some blooms on it. And again, it's one of the highly recommended plants from Prairie Godmothers that we think will make your garden planning a little bit easier, having these, having been able to get these from your garden center. Next. So I'm getting ready to close. I don't know if you have any questions, but I'd be glad to answer them. What I hope you walk away with is information on your next garden space, your next native garden space. I applaud all of you for wanting to introduce more natives or your first native to your garden. It's a way that we can really start to protect our planet, even in small ways. So gave you a little information about how to figure out if your property is sunny, shady, wet, or dry. But I can tell you that for the most part, native plants will do fine in most any condition. It's important to sketch it out or visualize it so you know what you're stepping into and how much of an effort it's going to take, whether it's going to take a weekend, a week, a month to get it in place. Gave you some ideas on how to prepare your soil and make it easy for you. I hope you got some ideas on plants that maybe you haven't used before, but that are easily available at any one of those 50 places that the Bungalow Association put on their blog, and you'll get a link to that. And then finally, I encourage you to, whatever you do in your garden, have fun, because if it's not fun, it's not worth doing. And for me, as you learned, being in the garden is my happy place. It's where the world is all right for me. And having been doing it for more than half my life, I can say that it's been worth every second. Even though I have a fake knee, a fake hip, and I'm on my way to my second hip the day after tomorrow, it's well worth it. I just have to be more careful as I'm in the garden after that. So with that, I thank you. I'm going to leave information for you. I'll take questions, but if you want to pop to the next page, Angela, there's information where you can find me on my Facebook page with Prairie Godmothers. I really love phone calls. I really love emails. I am so fond of all you Bungalow folks that I'll go above and beyond to help you in any way I can. Carla, do I have any questions?
You sure do. It was a really generous offer too. I want to remind everybody, we're not going to probably get to all the questions because we've already got around 30 questions in here, but we can do a little rapid fire.
Email me, it's fine.
But yeah, it's a really generous offer. That's not always, something somebody's up for. So definitely, Jackie's an amazing person to reach out to. She's so thorough, knows everything. Also, I want to remind people that we're going to send out an email after this in the next day or two that's going to have a recording of this. It's going to have Jackie's PowerPoint. It's going to have a huge list of places you guys can, buy plants and stuff throughout the summer as well. So we have a hard stop at 7, but we've got 14 minutes to try and get through as many of these live before you pester Jackie outside of this hour and a half, or hour. Okay, keeping rabbits and squirrels from destroying your plantings. That's a really common one we've gotten.
That is a really common one. And, rabbits and squirrels have to eat, as you know, but I do a couple things. When I put a new plant in the ground, what I do is I collar it. I collar the plant. And that means I take a plastic water bottle, whether it's a small water bottle or a 2-liter bottle, and I have a huge assortment of them. I don't use water bottles anymore that are disposable because I don't like them to go to a landfill. But what I do is cut off the top and bottom, and I put that over my plant. That prevents rabbits from nibbling them until they get to be 6 or 8 inches high. And that gives my plants a pretty good start. I also take cayenne pepper And I'll sprinkle that around the base of my plants, especially if I'm planting in a big drift. Squirrels generally do not like that, so it'll be a deterrent. There's nothing perfect that will keep squirrels and rabbits away, and they're a lot smarter than we are, so I change it up. Sometimes I'll change the cocktail of pepper a little bit, and I just watch it carefully when I collar things. So that's what I do. It seems to work.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and there's one more thing. And squirrels are going for food all the time. So I have a specific spot in my garden where I actually have peanuts and things like that for squirrels. And it's away from all my garden beds.
Nice.
They're not as smart as I think sometimes, because they like that and they stay away from the other areas.
Yeah, I see squirrels carrying full-on pizzas down the power lines by me. Like they find that they have such an assortment off my alley here. It's incredible. Okay, is Vinca and Pachysandra good ground Pachysandra good ground covers for Chicago?
They are good ground covers for Chicago. Vinca, Pachysandra is incredibly hardy and easy to grow, easy to split and move around in the garden. So Pachysandra is great. Vinca's great too. I happen to like Pachysandra. I think it's a little yellow flower. It looks nice. It does well in shade, of course, but does okay in sun too. So either are good, in my opinion. Again, my opinion, if you ask another gardener, he or she may not agree, but I have them both. I like them both.
This one's a little off topic, but it piggybacked on the squirrels, and somebody's having trouble with squirrels attacking their chickens and hens. And it just seemed like something you might know. So I figured, outside of like distracting them with another food source.
You know what? I know hen, and I know people that keep coops. And in my experience talking to them, they really have to protect those birds on the side and on the top, and that would be just to make sure that the houses, the hen house, if you will, and the coops are really covered. That would be the only suggestion I would have, because they can get in. I have a friend in Minnesota who had 50 birds, a hen house that was like the Taj Mahal, and there was a little opening at the very top, and a cat got into it and got her birds. So I would just say keep it protected the best you can. Keep the birds protected the best you can.
Yeah. Okay. Another person is having rain barrel issues that's causing, sorry, but my cat keeps jumping up here, causing leakage in her basement. And that is just a matter of connecting a second rain barrel, I think, to your existing rain barrel for that overflow. Bravo for having a rain barrel.
Yes and no. I had 2 rain barrels at the corner of my property. I live in a ranch style home. And I actually, I had to do a couple things. I planted things around the rain barrel that don't mind wet feet. So I have a couple shrubs in there that don't mind wet feet. But eventually I had to completely move them away from the foundation of the house, because I live in an old house. The foundation is good, but it's not perfect. And even though I had something to catch the overflow, sometimes you just can't manage all that water. So I would say a second rain barrel is great. I would say you have to have an opportunity for that water to the overflow to move away from the house, and you want to make sure it's moving away from the house down a slope and not up.
Right. Okay, great.
I've learned a lot from my mistakes, Carla.
Yeah, I know. You and me both.
Yeah.
Our neighbors planted Siberian squill in an area directly adjoining our front yard. I know it's not native, and I've heard it can spread and eventually take over other spaces. Some sources have termed it invasive. Should we try to control it in our yard? We still have a small area of grass, but it's also next to some native cranesbill.
Yeah, it moves about. And actually, I don't know if it sends out tubers or not, but it runs underground, and you're either a fan of it or you're not. It will cross driveways and things like that.
Yeah, it
So
doesn't know boundaries.
it doesn't know boundaries. It is
Right.
invasive. I don't have a solution for it, unless you want to have a conversation with your neighbor. But you can, I mean, the humane way to manage it is to actually pull it out as it moves your way. But, generally speaking, yes, it can take over.
Okay. Is lilac shrub and a dogwood tree good for Chicago? And honeysuckle? I'm reading that.
Lilacs are fine. Again, right plant, right location. So you have to make sure that you understand the size that this lilac is going to be, because they have dwarf varieties, they have standard varieties. You don't want to plant it too close to the house. You want to give the root system at least 5 feet for it to grow underground. But yeah, they're fine. What was the other one?
It was, hang on. Where did that go? Sorry, I know honeysuckle was at the end of that.
Okay.
Where did that go?
If you
Oh,
find
sorry, dogwood, lilac shrub
Dogwood.
and dogwood.
Dogwoods, same thing. Yes, dogwoods. Dogwoods are really good in this area, but I'm going to tell you exactly. If you're looking for a native dogwood, consider two: a pagoda dogwood or a flowering dogwood. They are both native, but there are also 3 more that I'm looking at on the Possibility Place site: a blue fruited dogwood, a gray dogwood, and a red twig. They range from full sun to partial sun. They range from dry to wet. So whatever your space is, there is a native dogwood for you.
All right. Jean was asking about if you have any tips on how to successfully negotiate with People's Gas to do a site restoration after digging up the ground to do their work. That's a tough one, as someone who's worked with utilities. I don't know if you have any experience or anything like that, but I know
I have suburban experience. I don't live in a big city. I live in a suburb with 9,000 people. And when the city ripped up my property to put in underground pipes and all that kind of stuff for sewage, they had to bring in other utilities, but they worked with me. What they didn't do really well is restore it. They'll put down a mat, a seeded mat, so the grass will grow. But it's much easier when you talk to these folks when you live in one of these sleepy little towns as opposed to a city. So the long answer to the short question is I don't have experience in a city.
Yeah, and they seem to just spec because they do so much and they do everything because it's a monopoly. So they'll, they're like forcing some bushes on there. I'm sorry, Jean. It's a tough battle. I'm not sure there's a kind of taken out of context question. Could you please repeat part sun, 4 to 6 hours of sun per day, and part shade? I think they want to know what the difference between part sun and part shade is.
Well, so the difference between part sun and part shade is the time of day the sun hits the spot. So part sun is when it you've got 46 hours for the morning to the early afternoon. And part shade is when it's shadier in the afternoon. So it depends. It just depends when it hits. And I'm more concerned about buying a plant that thrives in part shade, because that means it can't have direct sunlight in the late afternoon.
Okay.
They just have to pay attention to that.
All right, 3 minutes just to warn everybody. So we'll get through as much as we can. Again, you can email Jackie as well. We can put Jackie's information too in our follow-up email for y'all. So any advice for a front yard / parkway with no grass that's all flowers and ground cover? That's kind of a broad question, but
well, the question I would say is, what do you want it to feel like, right? How much work how much, if it's a parkway, I'm sure the work will come to you. How much work do you want to do? How much time do you want to invest? How much money do you want to invest? If it has a nice coat of mulch or something on it and some plants, you know, the answer is it depends what you want it to feel like. If you want it to feel like a native garden, there's work to do. If you want it to be a haven for birds and butterflies, there's work to do. If you don't want to do a lot of work, but you want to change it up and have a really interesting profile, I would look at a combination of shrubs and grasses. Shrubs and grasses don't take as much work as forbs plants, and you can still get a lovely focal point for the parkway.
Okay. Do you have any recommendations for small or medium seasonal hanging planters or planter boxes to attract pollinators and also add some color?
So are we, I think that is, when you said seasonal, I think that means annuals and attracting butterflies and birds. A verbena comes to mind, VERBENA. That's one that comes to mind. And I don't do annual plants, so I won't be much help beyond that. I know that the bees and butterflies like the verbena. What I do is I take native plants and I put them in containers and let them decorate, you know, have them hanging around to attract some plants, some birds and butterflies to my house. But verbena would be one that I would go to. And I would bet that somewhere on the Bungalow website, with the gardens that we've designed for the front and back of the house, there's probably some reference to plants that would work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Two quick ones. Is that okay, Jackie? Just because they seem important, and there are other people who liked them. So is there a good place to get simple layout plans? It's a good question.
Yes, there's a place. So one of them is on your Bungalow site. But the other one would be, I'm flipping through my notes here. The other one would be look at Prairie Moon Nursery. Mm-hmm. And look at Wild Ones. They both lay out gardens for you. Prairie Moon Nursery, because they have kits that they sell, that they recommend. Possibility Place also sells kits for gardens, but Prairie Moon and Wild Ones would be where I would look.
And you can go on their website for those?
Yep.
That's great. Okay. Yep. There's tons, I know, if you Google it, but if they're specific, you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, what you'll find on Prairie Moon Nursery and Wild Ones is they have they have layouts and they name the plants as well. Possibility Place names the plants, but they don't specify any particular layout. They leave it up to your imagination.
Okay. Very cool. And the other one I just wanted to make sure we got in live was asking about which plants could be harmful to dogs.
Nothing
of the native plants.
Nothing comes to mind for natives, but I would, there is a native, I have to check on this. There is a native foxglove, and sometimes a foxglove, digitalis, can be harmful. If I can do that while I'm talking to you, I'll try that. But one of the things that's harmful to pets is the mulch that you use. So if anybody, so what I'm looking here is the entire foxglove plant, I'm going to say native to be sure as well, is toxic when it's ingested by dogs and cats. That's the one that comes to mind. The other thing that comes to mind is cocoa bean hull mulch.
Right.
Cocoa bean hull is chocolate. If it's ingested, it's harmful to dogs especially. And it doesn't really last long in a garden. It looks good and it smells good, and then it looks like dirt 2 weeks later.
It does smell so good though. I know I have like a community garden, which is fenced off, so I'm allowed to use it there, but
right.
Yeah. Okay, so, well, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm just looking at foxglove is the one that is popping up as I'm looking online. So that's the only one I can think of.
Great. And again, just want to remind everybody, we'll have Jackie's contact info in our follow-up email as well. So don't panic if you didn't get there's a lot of questions we didn't get to, which always happens because everybody's so
I am
curious.
glad to take calls tomorrow, which is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I'm getting a new bionic hip, so I'm out of
Oh, that's
service.
right. This will be entertainment for you as you.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'll answer emails. I hope they don't sound wonky if I'm under anesthetic, but I'll do emails.
I was gonna say, what days should they not write you?
Don't call me on Thursday and Friday.
Yeah. People, we'll be getting a lot of interesting responses from our members. What was Jackie telling me to do? So thank you everybody
Thank you for inviting me. I enjoy this all the time, and I'm glad to help anybody listening. If you have questions, just reach out to me.
Great. Thank you so much, Jackie. Everybody always loves when you do these. So we really appreciate it. And it's like such a great day to be talking about this stuff.
Yeah, it is. Isn't it? Finally.
Really excited.
Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a great night.
Uh-huh.
All right.